Welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for Afterwords, which is a United Way live storytelling event that explores the distinctive space where issues and individuals meet. For anybody who is new here, who's not familiar with United Way, the Greater Triangle has the bold mission to eradicate poverty and increase social mobility through the power of partnerships. And with that mission, we serve a 4-county region locally: Wake, Durham, Orange, and Johnston counties. And we've been around for a long time. You may or may not be aware, but for 133 years, United Ways, not just ours, but across the country, have served those who are really crushed under the weight of impoverished environments. And that service has long looked and felt like charity. And we realize that the next 133 years deserve more. And that's why we're shifting our focus to justice-oriented solutions that attack the root causes and don't just deal with the effects of poverty. And it's one thing to know that these things need to happen, but it's another to shift the community narrative so that solutions best identified to support community change don't face the roadblocks that can prevent that change from happening. And that's really where storytelling comes in. So this event today is not just about you guys hearing great stories, although that's, obviously a huge benefit. But storytelling has the power to shift mindsets. It has the power to put people in somebody else's shoes so that they can live the experience in real time with them, so that they can better empathize, so you can better know exactly what your neighbors are experiencing, exactly what they're feeling, even if you're not going through the same experience yourself. Our communities are defined by those connected stories because they highlight those shared feelings and experiences. They emphasize triumphs and fears, and they can ultimately motivate us towards a greater good. But what happens after the words have been said, right? It's the people that are behind them that remain. And so we've invited 3 of those people, 3 leaders here with us today to tell their stories on this virtual stage. The work that these leaders do is critical to achieving United Way's mission. So you can see all of them here, and I'm going to introduce them before each of their stories. So if you don't get to meet whomever you're here to see at the beginning, rest assured they will be introduced before the end. So without further ado, I want to welcome our first speaker to the virtual stage. Jenice Ramirez is a proud Latina, United Way 10 to Watch leader, and the executive director of ISLA NC, which is a local nonprofit organization with the mission to build community and leadership through educational Spanish language and cultural immersion programs. When asked, we asked her what her deepest passion is, because we really wanted you to feel exactly who Jenice is and what she's about before she tells her story. We want you to close your eyes and get ready to experience the whole thing. And so when we asked her what her deepest passion is, she said, it's to be an example and representation of women breaking glass ceilings in leadership. She wants her daughter and little girls everywhere to see themselves in anything they want to do, no matter what, and that no one or nothing can get in their way. So Jenice, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. And I'm purposely not looking to see how many participants are here, so I don't get too nervous, even on this virtual stage. So I'm going to get right into my story. I'm going to start by asking you guys, what do these 5 places have in common? Germany, Texas, Panama, Alabama, Puerto Rico, and North Carolina. You're probably thinking not very much. Well, I will say that they have a lot of really cool places to visit, every single one of them. Germany has amazing castles to visit. You got Texas that has the San Antonio River Walk. You got Alabama that has, Huntsville, Alabama specifically, that has the Space Center. You also have the beauty of all kinds of nature, from beach to the mountains in North Carolina. Panama has these black sand beaches. You have the canal in Panama. And Puerto Rico, which is, I'm a little biased because I'm Puerto Riqueña, has some of the best food, people, beaches, and really the top beaches in the world. I don't know if you guys can actually look this up. Flamenco Beach in Culebra, Puerto Rico has been ranked as the top beach in the world to go visit. So what they also have in common is that me and my family got to live in all of these places. And you're probably wondering, well, how did you all do that? So my dad joined the military when he was 19 years old. He wanted to establish a better life for himself. And soon after, my mom followed. They had me in Germany. So I was born in Germany to 2 Puerto Rican parents. Throughout my childhood, we went to Puerto Rico all of the time. My parents found a way to get there. And I have two siblings. I'm the oldest of three. And my youngest brother, once my mom got pregnant with the third, she said, one of my kids needs to be born in Puerto Rico. So my youngest brother is the only one of us that was born in Puerto Rico. And so as we moved around to all these different places, so by the age of 10, I had moved already between 10 to 11 times. And that's not including like the different houses that we moved. So switching schools was a huge thing for me. And one of the things that I think has been just absolutely amazing about being an Army brat, what I like to call myself, is that in these moving around to different places, there was a lot of things about myself I got to learn and that I realize now as an adult. And so I'm going to share with you a story of what happened to me in third grade. And this was the first time that I realized what belonging meant to me, what home meant to me. And so we're going to dig into that. So I'm in third grade, and in third grade, there's a lot of reading because reading tests happen, and that's been a thing for a very long time. And so we're opening up our reading books and we're getting to the story of the week, and I'm looking and I'm like, ooh, these pictures are cool. And there's these families, they're partying. And I look at the paragraphs, and I want to preface too that I'm not a very good reader. So like even in third grade, I was not the one to raise my hand and say, oh, hey, I'm going to read. I tried not to be the one to get picked for popcorn reading. But when I look down, I noticed that there are two paragraphs on the page. One is in English and the other one is in Spanish. And I got so excited because in my household, my parents wanted us to constantly speak Spanish. So we walked into those doors. We were not supposed to speak to our parents in English. We were supposed to be speaking Spanish. And in the classroom space, it was very uncommon for Spanish to be brought in. It was very uncommon for there to be anything related to my culture, to where my family comes from, or, speaking the language. And as a matter of fact, in third grade specifically, I was the only Spanish speaking Latina in my class. And so the teacher introduces the story, and then she says, does anyone know how to read in Spanish? Jenice, do you know how to read in Spanish? I was like, I sure do. And I could read this. Guys, again, I cannot read very well, not in English nor in Spanish. And so I made it up. Throughout the time, somebody would read in English, and then I was supposed to be translating. So what I was doing was translating in my head what my friend just said, reading, out loud. And that was the first time that I remember being so proud of my language and being proud of where I came from, right? And the story had nothing to do with Puerto Rico. The story had to do with tamales, but I was so excited. And so throughout my life, I have found different things from, lunch, for example, where my friends brought peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I bought rice and beans and pork chops, and I was super excited about it, to share my habichuelas that my mom made. I was always excited to say that this is who I am. And so it has unfolded in all these different ways throughout my life. And, when I realized that when I became a teacher, that there's so many people that don't have that same experience as me, that don't feel that sense of belonging, that don't feel that sense of pride of who they are and where they come from, it makes a huge impact on their life. And so when I started as the executive director of ISLA, one of the things that I've always wanted to do is allow for ISLA to be a place that people can call home, that our students, which I relate to the most, being what I call multicultural, because I have my home life and I have like inside my home life and I have my outside life. How do I find that sense of belonging to somewhere, something, and that something that means so much to me, which is my culture, is respected and wanted and belongs to our society, right? And so at ISLA, we try to create every single program that we have a place where our students see themselves reflected, their culture reflected, their language, and more than importantly, that they could be proud of who they are and where they come from. So for me, home is not the four walls. Home is not, where I lay my head at night. Home is mi cultura, my rice and beans, my Spanish language, my beautiful beaches of Puerto Rico, my love for dancing, music. And I hope that we can continue doing this work at ISLA, where anyone that comes through our doors feels a little bit of home at ISLA NC. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Jenice. You know, one of the themes that the audience is going to hear today in these stories is just what home means to everybody. And that one of those themes is that, like you said, home is not necessarily just four walls and a roof. That home, like you just mentioned, needs to be rooted in a sense of belonging. And I love hearing that your first experience being proud of your language, being able to share that language with your fellow students, because I don't know about everybody else, but I don't often hear stories that start with feeling proud of your culture, when your culture might be different than your peers. And I think it's personally a great time to be having this conversation as a community, because while we know that the Triangle is already pretty diverse, we also know that the region is expecting, for example, an influx of Afghan refugees in the very near future. And so I wanted to ask you, while we have your voice here, what can people on this call do to support their neighbors from different cultures so that they have the same experience that you do, so that their neighbors can feel at home in this region as well?
I think that one of the first things is show appreciation for the diversity and the differences that exist, right? Like get to know, ask questions about, what are these places like? Look it up, do your own research, right? On the different places and the diversity that exists. Because I think, when we create these programs specifically around teaching Spanish through culture, one of the main reasons for that is to grow that empathy for one another, to know that there is this great diversity, even between Latin America. We're not all a monolith. You can't put us in one box, right? And so many times, especially in our society, we try to do that. We try to say everyone fits right here, but we don't. And so when we teach about diversity, especially in children, we get to teach real empathy and real respect for the differences and the people that we are. And that in itself makes one want to be proud of who they are and where they come from, because I get to share something with you that you may get to add to your toolkit of things that you can share with other people. And so for me, it's just starting by asking those questions, being inquisitive, and knowing that it's good to look and learn about what diversity exists in your neighbors.
Thank you. And I do have one more question that I know I didn't particularly prepare you for, but I think it's a great time to bring this up. You mentioned prior to the webinar starting that ISLA has a winter celebration tomorrow in Chapel Hill, and I wanted to know if you wanted to tell everybody about that.
Yes. So our ISLA Los Sábados program, which is where we host over 200 Latino students from pre-K3 all the way to high school, they're coming together to sell tamales, different types of food. We're just going to have games for kids. This is at St. Thomas More Elementary School in Chapel Hill between 10 and 12. So feel free to come and join us and get to know more about what ISLA does and get to see the students. It is going to be outside, so this is a COVID safe place. Also, we are requiring masks. So if you do come to the event, we are requiring a mask outdoors because there might be quite a few people. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And again, if anybody has questions for Jenice or any of these other storytellers as we go, please drop it into the chat below, and we'll do our best to get to them during these interview portions between the stories. But next up, our next storyteller is Seth Friedman. Seth is the CEO of Passage Home, which is a Raleigh-based nonprofit organization with the mission to break the cycle of poverty and create multi-generational self-sufficiency for the individuals and families of Wake County by helping them achieve housing and income security. Seth has been a social sector leader for 2 decades, holding leadership positions at national organizations, including Father Flanagan's Boys Town and the ACLU. His experience encompasses organizations focused on social justice, community development, education, and each stop focused on breaking the cycle of poverty and trauma. We asked Seth who inspires him every day, and he said it's the people that do the work and have everything to lose. And he also, in thinking about his answer, shared that the late Bell Hooks, who passed away this week, a revolutionary author, professor, feminist, and social activist, was the epitome of that. So everybody, please welcome Seth to the stage, the virtual stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share my story. So for so many people in the Triangle today, I grew up in the Northeast, in the shadow of New York City, but uniquely, I grew up on a summer camp, a camp that my parents ran. And for those that are unfamiliar with summer camps in the Northeast, it's a big business up there. Families could easily pay $20,000 to send their kids away for 6 weeks for a residential camp. These camps had jet skis, had sailboats, horses, just really the life of luxury for a kid looking to get away from the summer. That was not the type of camp I grew up in. The camp I grew up on was rustic, to say the least. It was built specifically to help kids escape the urban areas of New York City, Philadelphia, Newark, and Patterson for the summer to experience something new. And the makeup of the kids was quite unique. We had Russian and Polish immigrants from Sheepshead Bay, a lot of Black and African-American families from Philadelphia, Bed-Stuy, Patterson and Newark, and Hispanic families from all over, and a lot of poor rural white families that came in from Long Island. So it was a really unique mix in campers. And to make the situation even more diverse and unique, most of the counselors were international. They came from South America, came from Africa, came from Western Europe, some from Australia, and the counselors typically came from wealthy backgrounds, those who could afford to go away for 3 months in the summer to make a camp counselor salary, then fly back a few weeks later. And this camp, when I say rustic, the cabins we stayed in were 4 walls with chicken wire windows. So if it rained at night, you got wet. The wind blew in that cabin, you felt it. If you were lucky, your shower had hot water. If you were unlucky, it was a hose hooked up on top of a little wooden shelf. And the town I grew up in, the town this camp was on, was a town called West Milford, New Jersey. And what it's famous for, it is the bear capital of America. So I'm trying to paint a picture. This was far from the life of luxury. But I grew up, I was actually born the first year my parents were there. And I grew up all the way through high school there. And as I grew up, I noticed the same people kept coming back. The same kids kept coming back. The same counselors kept coming back. And when I say the counselors kept coming back, my parents grew the summer camp from just a 3-month program to an all-year program focused on alternative education. They would take kids out of the New York City schools that were struggling with traditional learning environments, have them live at the camp year-round with teachers, social workers, mental health counselors, to provide support in a new learning environment where they could succeed. And these international counselors from wealthy environments across the world would come live in this rustic, cold, mountainous, bear-ridden camp for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And you know, as the winter approached, we would winterize the cabins by taping a heavy sheet of plastic over the windows and giving them a space heater. So they had to make a lot of sacrifices to be here. And growing up, I never understood. I was like, why? Why do they keep coming back? What is it about this place? Because they're not getting rich. They're isolated in a small mountain community. What is it about this place that they keep coming back? And as I got older, I come to realize that this camp that I grew up on was special because 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it created an environment, you know, that we would call DEI friendly now, but was before a lot of these terms happened. It was accepting of all races, of all cultures, of all genders, of all gender identities, of all sexual preferences. And it welcomed everybody. And one of the first things it did when you got off the bus, off the airplane, out of your car, it said, you know, be who you are, bring your unique style, bring your personality. And what I realized is this was the first time a lot of these staff, a lot of these kids, no matter their background, felt truly safe, felt truly like they belonged, felt that this camp didn't accept them because of their baggage. They accepted them, or I'm sorry, they didn't accept them despite their baggage. They accepted them because of the building blocks their life had created that led them to who they are. And so these families, these people, these adults kept coming back because this was the first place they ever truly felt safe, ever truly felt like they belonged, ever truly felt like they could be themselves. So I started to realize that, as Devin said, home is not four walls. Home was a place they felt safe, they felt secure, they felt that they could venture out and not worry about repercussions from failure. And because this environment that, not only my parents created, but my parents helped create, this was the environment I grew up in. So I moved from New Jersey, got my undergraduate from East Carolina. As soon as I graduated from East Carolina, I hopped in a car and drove halfway across the country to a small town right outside of Chicago, Illinois, called Mooseheart Child City. That is the full name of the town, Mooseheart Child City, where families from the Midwest, Southside Chicago, rural Michigan would send their kids that had a lot of potential, but not a lot of support to come live. And a very similar concept where they were able to belong in this little town and thrive because this is the first place that they felt safe. But the reason I was able to get in my car and drive across the country was because my parents built an environment for me that allowed me to fail, allowed me to feel safe. And yes, part of that is white privilege. And that my parents had the financial background that if I failed, they would buy me a bus ticket, they would buy me a plane ticket back home, absolutely. But they also gave me the emotional support I needed to venture out, to take chances, to possibly fail on my own, but knowing that I had a home to come back to. And that home didn't have to be on that camp. It could have been anywhere in the world, wherever my parents lived. And I remember when I was in school at East Carolina, I studied psychology, and I took an abnormal psychology class. And one of the lessons the abnormal psychology professor taught us, he says, no matter how old you are, no matter if your parents are living or dead, if you see, and again, this is coming from a white perspective 25 years ago, if you see police sirens in your back of your car, your first thought is, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me, right? Like you're going to get in trouble with your parents. And obviously, again, white perspective. Until this day, I still think about that because whenever I see a police siren in the back of my car, whether it's coming for me or coming past me, I always think, what is my dad? My dad's going to be so mad at me. But the opposite is true too, right? Even I'm in my 40s, I'm reasonably successful. I still know that no matter what happens, no matter whether I fail or succeed, my parents are going to be there for me in the bottom of my heart. I don't even have to think about it. So I can take those chances. And so that's what home means to me, is that security, that belonging, that safety, that no matter what, you have someone that loves and cares for you, and you can go out and take chances.
Thank you, Seth. That was beautiful. And before we get to the question that I want to ask you, I want to make a point to the audience today that we host these events because storytelling has the ability to shift mindsets. But I want to point out that we're not just hosting these for you all, but that United Way team members also tend to learn a lot from these experiences. And just to give a little bit of background, the United Way team, we fund over 90 nonprofits in the Triangle across 4 counties. And we make a point every year to meet with every single nonprofit partner for an hour face-to-face. And so during COVID, that's obviously been virtual, but we were still talking to each other live. And I only recently got the chance to meet Seth during one of those conversations. And I remember after we finished that hour-long conversation with Seth and his team, I think I can speak for the rest of my team when we say that we were blown away by just how thoughtful, just how strategic, just how intentional Seth and his team are in the work that they're doing. And so when I hear the story about your background, it makes so much sense. I can piece together the person that I know now, that I've met, and the stories that I've heard from you, and where that person came from, and perhaps even be able to envision where you might be going in your future, where your next step might be. And I think that's such a powerful experience as human beings, for us to be able to have that knowledge, to put those puzzle pieces together, because while we're all so very different, we have the ability to align in ways that are just so uniquely human. And so I wanted to call that out. And also I wanted to point out for the audience, like you said, Seth, that your story focuses on home being the concept of being a safe place to grow. And that really aligns with United Way's perspective when it comes to investing in housing, is not just investing in a building that people live in, but housing that is affordable, housing that is safe, housing that is comfortable, that is within the environment that people need and want to be in. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you and your team at Passage Home create safety for people in the Triangle?
Yeah, so, as I spoke about my personal story, I was very aware of the privilege I speak with and speak from. For a lot of our clients, safety to them is really just the basic needs: safe housing, food security, parents with the time and ability to take care of them, right? Because a lot of our parents are working 2 or 3 jobs, and we want to blame the parents for not being able to read for the kids. But when you have 4 hours of rest a night and you have to go right back to work because you're working 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs, it's a challenge. So we look to provide safety, security, by developing affordable housing in Wake County, by building new affordable housing complexes, but also by supporting the families multi-generationally. Either, at times we will help pay rent or mortgages when a family's really struggling, but we also look to help families up the economic ladder and with social mobility through job training and support. Right? A lot of our families might just need help with transportation for a couple of weeks so they don't fall so far behind. We have a lot of flexibility to help them at their unique barriers, but at the same time, poverty, trauma is cyclical. A child that grows up in poverty experiences a lot of the same things that force their parents into poverty. So we look to support the child through youth development, through connections. At the same time, we're supporting the parent to help cultivate that safe environment.
Thank you. That was really helpful to hear. And I'm sure the audience, it was helpful for them too. And, I know we talked about the celebration that ISLA is having tomorrow. And now I want to look to Passage Home. How can people on this call support the work that you and your team are doing?
Yeah, I think there's a great way that you can do it today. Very easy. We at the Passage Home as a staff aren't arrogant enough to believe that we know the answers. So every few years we do a community needs assessment where we ask all members of the community, say, hey, like, what is it that you think would help in our service? How can we be better? What are the needs you're seeing? So if you go to our social media, just Passage Home / Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, we have a link to a community needs assessment to take 10-15 minutes where you can let your voice known. And while we are a Wake County specific organization, if you live in the area, most likely the causes of poverty, the entrenchments of poverty are similar. So we encourage you to fill it out to help myself and our team get a better understanding of the needs of the community.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to Laura's story, I just want to drop a link to the post you guys have on Facebook for the audience here about that needs assessment. So if anybody is interested in contributing to that link is there for you. And then just a note for everybody at the end of this, I'm also going to drop links to the websites for the different organizations that if you want to learn more, if you want to volunteer, if you want to donate to these organizations, if you want to just write them an email and say, great job, and happy holidays, you'll have all that information there. So thank you, Seth. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of that. Last but certainly not least, we have our final storyteller of the afternoon. That's Laura Martin on the screen here. Laura is the volunteer coordinator with Oak City Cares, which is a multi-services hub for people experiencing homelessness. Prior to joining the innovative and collaborative approach to ending homelessness, Laura served as the executive director of Dress for Success Triangle, expanding career opportunities for women in Raleigh and Durham. Laura is passionate about building a strong community, growing diverse and meaningful relationships, and working creatively together to ensure that we all have access and opportunity to lead. When we asked her what home means to her, she said, home is expansive. It was created in a million different ways, or it's created in a million different ways. It's the place where, along with the people who love you, you can absolutely belong. So everybody, please welcome Laura. Thank you.
Okay, so my story is going to be hot. It's going to be a hot story. And my story is also going to be sweaty. and it's not hot and sweaty in a good way. For those of you that think it might be hot and sweaty in a good way, that is not the story. I think sometimes when we talk about home, right, we don't always talk about the smells of home, right? And this was hot and sweaty, like the funk of your favorite teenager. So if you have kids in your home, you know, just go with me to that place. Sometimes people say that there are 1,000 different words for snow. Well, there are equally as many words for sweaty. And this was 105 degrees in the summer of 2019. And it was hot, like a lobby full of unhoused men who were waiting to bathe. And in my case, that's actually what it was. It was actually a lobby full of unhoused people who were waiting to take a shower. We had just opened Oak City Cares. We're a multi-services center, and we're a place where people can come to take care of a lot of their basic needs. Seth touched some on why that's important in terms of safety. People can take a shower here, they can do their laundry here, they can charge their cell phones, they can get a meal. There are just a whole lot of very basic needs and safety that we can provide here. But that summer it was hot. And so our showers were by far the most popular service that we had. For any of you guys who work in the nonprofit sector, you already know that we did not open our facility with enough staff. And so we had about 100 to 120 people who were using our lobby services every day. And we had myself and a handful of faithful volunteers who were helping to navigate the chaos that was our lobby. Now the volunteers were in and out. So the volunteers, you know, some would come some days, some would come another, but I was there every day. And so all of our guests knew my name, and they would call my name constantly. And this could be for something as critical as a guest who was having a cardiac arrest, or it could be something as simple as somebody just really needed a clean pair of socks. And that went something like, you know, hey, Miss Laura, can you give me a clean shirt? And I'd go to get the shirt and get back, and somebody else would need something. No, not that shirt. One like you gave me last week, you know, the one with the stripes. I mean, I looked really good in that shirt, man. I looked so good in that shirt. Hey, Miss Laura, can you call Bruce an ambulance? I think he needs an ambulance. I think he needs it like right now. Hey, Miss Laura, that, and here, I think you're gonna have to insert your favorite, most colorful expletive, whatever that is for you. That jerk just stole my phone and I'm about to punch him in his face. And it was chaotic like that. And the thing with that is it gets in the way of some really important to the work practices, like reflexive listening and being fully present with people. I think some of these things that we're talking about in terms of home are times that we're seeking to be fully present with other people who love us and who care about us and can help us find that place inside that's home. Most of my days were not that. But there was always one time where I could find that centering place of home in myself. And it was when people would come in with service dogs. So for people who are experiencing homelessness, a whole lot of folks have underlying health conditions. Like the root of their homelessness is our lack of health care, right? Or conditions that have caused them long-term health problems. And so they have service dogs that come with them. And for me, a little bit like Seth, where I grew up was not the most normal situation. I grew up in a small town in Alabama where my dad was the town veterinarian. And so we all went to work, right? We're kind of up and coming, trying to be aspirational, trying to own a small business. So everybody in my family went to work. And I literally grew up in a lobby full of people and their pets. And so that was like a deeply comforting situation for me. The relationship with people and their animals, listening to people talk about their animals, being with people and their animals. I found that very calming. And hands down that summer in all that heat, my favorite service dog was Abigail. Abigail, she was a smooth coat border collie. She was black and white with really sharp ears. Her muzzle was graying. She's probably 14, 15 years old. And Abigail's whole role was to look out for Tracy. Now, Tracy was one of our guests. He lived next door at the South Wilmington Street Men's Shelter. Right next to us, there's a 243 bed shelter for men who are experiencing homelessness. And Tracy had landed there that summer with an inoperable heart condition. And Abigail, when his blood pressure would drop dangerously low, she was there to alert somebody or to go for help. And I'm sure you can imagine if it's 105 degrees and you have a heart condition and you are sleeping with 243 other men and your dog, that something as simple as a shower and some privacy can be a very important thing. And with Tracy, the thing was, I loved seeing him. I loved when he and Abigail would come in, and he was so kind and he was so steady, and he was an inspiration and encouragement to me every time they came. I think when he tells the story, and he does tell the story, if you, I can send the story later from his point of view, but when he tells the story, he'd tell you like, I'm his angel. And I think when I tell the story, he's definitely far more mine, but there was a mutuality in our relationship, right? And I think whenever we can get to that mutuality, it's easy to create home. But that summer, they grounded me. Tracy and Abigail really, really grounded me. And one day they came in, and I reached behind the desk. We all kept treats behind the desk for the dogs. So Abigail came in, and I went to grab her treat, and I caught Tracy's eye, and you could just tell like something was really wrong. He was really not in a good place. So I said, "Hey man, what's wrong?" He's like, "Well, they gave me an exit date. I've got to leave." And what he meant was that the shelter next door had given him an absolute date by which he had to leave there, and he and Abigail could no longer sleep there, and they were going to have to figure out where they're going to sleep. And so I said, "Okay, well, when is the date?" And he said, "Well, it's today." I said, "Okay, well, do you know where you're going to go?" And he said, I don't." And Tracy was not the kind of guy at all to cry, but you could hear his voice, like the tears were in his voice. And in that moment, I really wanted to be responsive to him. Like I really wanted to be there for him. And I honestly had no idea. I don't know if you guys have ever faced that moment where you don't know where you're going to sleep that night, but it's not something that's just immediately solvable. He was not from this area. Most of his friends were at the shelter or at our day services. He did have some income, but he didn't have connections, and he sure didn't have a rental or credit history that was going to be helpful. And it was that night that he really needed a place. And in that moment, I hugged him. That's what I had to do. So I hugged him, and I grabbed the only sheet of potential landlords that we had in the building. We had this one sheet. And I said, why don't you just start by trying these numbers? And I pointed over to the wall. We have a brand new, beautiful facility. It's state of the art. Our stuff is really nice. But our phones, it's like they never left 1987. They hang on the wall, and they're plastic, and they're black, and they're just the throwback phones. But they headed over to the phones, and I moved on to the next need. And I looked up, and they're gone. And I think that's the thing about this work sometimes is, like, for me, my story is often wrapped up in other people's stories. And it's because I'm generally at a crossroad where other people are having large pivotal moments, and I'm there just manning the crossroads. And so in these moments, you don't ever really know how the story is going to go, right? It's not my primary story, but I'm part of it. I'm in that moment, and I don't know how it's going to turn out. Sometimes it's heartbreaking, and sometimes it's the most uplifting thing that could ever happen. And so I didn't know what was going to happen with Tracy and Abigail. They came back in later that afternoon, and he said, "Hey, the first guy on that sheet that you gave me," again, he thinks that somehow I knew this guy was going to have a place for him. I did not. That first guy, he had a room, and he was a veteran, and I was a veteran, and he can't get over there tonight, but he said I could go ahead and pick up the key, and Abigail and I can go over there and spend the night, and then tomorrow we'll sign the paperwork. So it's all done. And that never happens. That's not a thing that usually happens in a housing search. And so Tracy and Abigail still today, they still live in that house. And not only that, but Tracy took over the mortgage and the deed on the house. He sends me pictures often of Abigail like playing frisbee in the yard, of Abigail curled up in the bed, things that she really couldn't do when they were at South Wilmington Street. And I love that they are still grounding for me, right? A lot of things have changed since 2019. So much of our lives are different, but for me, they've been a real steadfast friendship. At Oak City Cares, we've grown our staff so much. So all of that initial chaos of startup and opening for the first time has settled. We're able to be a little more intentional. We're able to create much more a larger space that's safe and that's present. But I love that Tracy and Abigail are always part of my story, and I'm always part of theirs, and that we really are, that we're in community together, right? I love that I'll see him before Christmas. He'll come by, he'll drop off snacks for our current guests. And I know that I can reach out to him when I have somebody that needs a room that nobody else will rent to, right? And so it started off as a relationship where I'm trying to be responsive to his need, not particularly effectively, right? But we're there together. And now we're in a situation where he can be responsive to my need, right? And in that process, I think for me, friendships and relationships and creating those really centering, grounding moments are an important part of home. So I think we all together in this conversation are really trying to expand the idea of home. Each of us have different experiences of home, but in sharing this together and being in relationship with one another, hopefully we do a better job going forward of ensuring that everybody belongs, right? The spaces that we make, everybody belongs, and everybody's perspective is valid, and we can all have housing.
That story was so beautiful. And it got even more, I heard it yesterday and it got even more beautiful today. And so I want to thank you for sharing that. And before we get to the question I have for you, I wasn't planning to tell my own story today, but I think the story that came to mind for me is poignant here and poignant for the question. I have a similar friend. His name is Jeff, and I met him when I worked at United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And United Way of Greater Los Angeles focuses heavily on the homelessness challenge in LA County. It's the second biggest, Los Angeles is the second biggest city in the United States. And with that comes an incredible amount of challenges, especially as housing prices continue to increase and the salaries don't follow it. And Jeff grew up for the first 8 years with his family before they decided to put him in foster care. Just dropped him off one day, never came back. And so he grew up in the foster care system. He was very angry. He got out at 18. He fell in with a bad crowd. He went to jail. He spent some time in jail. And then once he was released, he decided he was going, as he describes it, he was going to do a scorched earth, and he was just going to find a quiet place to sit in the park and not talk to anybody because he just wanted peace and quiet and solitude, and he didn't want to get in trouble anymore. And it was there that somebody from a local permanent supportive housing organization found him. And this person spent a year coming back to visit him in the park to convince him to come inside because he just didn't want anything to do with systems, with people, because he had been so burned by experiences over the years. So when I met Jeff, he had been in his home in a permanent supportive housing building for 16 years. And he said for the first 3 years, he shut the door and he cried and he never came out. He didn't talk to anybody. He just spent a lot of time in his own feelings. I think, feeling the safety of that, that permanent place that he was in. And I met Jeff to tell his story, and Jeff and I have stayed in touch over the years. When I would give him like gifts for the holidays, I sometimes like to give him gift cards because he became a friend. He would show me what he bought for his apartment to make it his own. When I had my first child, he reached out to me to say congratulations. When I had my second child, I reached out to him to send pictures. And we touch base every couple of months, but Jeff was one of the first people that I met, despite the fact that we have very different life experiences. His story was one of the first times I was able to understand the trauma of homelessness, the trauma of coming back inside. And I can also appreciate, Laura, just how strong that connection can be after you've really gotten to understand somebody and hear their stories from such a personal point of view. And it really touched me to hear that. And after we get off this call, I'm going to text Jeff because I miss him. But your story, highlights the feeling that home can live within community. And for anybody who didn't pick up on it, Oak City Cares is not a place where people can sleep at night. It's a day services center, and it intentionally builds that community for people who are unhoused, for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so which is the same term, just said different ways, but why is having a community so important for people who are living in those situations?
Well, I mean, for me, I would say like as humans, right? As humans, we need relationships. We need people that are going to take care of us and look out for us. And no matter what your housing situation is, we still need those people, right? So I have a lot of people here who maybe they camp in the woods or maybe they sleep out on the street, but they still have a community. They still have neighbors. They still have extended family. They still have places that they go and they go together. And so that fabric of community that exists in us as humans with or without walls, right? I mean, that's I think that's just the thing that we require is that we have other people that understand us and that care about us and that look out for us and to whom we belong, right? That's important to all of us.
Absolutely. And just like your storytellers before you, I want to make sure to ask, how can everybody here support the work that Oak City Cares is doing?
I mean, I think one of the best ways to support the work that we're doing is to come down on a weekend and meet some people, right? And to build your own relationships, right? To come down and hang out at the crossroads and just see how you fit in, see what part you have to play in the community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Before we end today, we're going to end a few minutes early. As promised, I wanted to make sure to share the websites for the 3 organizations that these leaders represent, and apologize for the formatting. I went from Word to Zoom, and you know how that works. But these are the websites, like Laura said, get in touch, get involved, whether that's showing up to volunteer, whether it's, meeting folks, whether it's, coming to a tamale sale and buying some incredible food, whether it's sharing a Facebook post, taking a community needs assessment. There are so many ways to get involved in the community beyond donating, beyond showing up to these events. And we really encourage you all to seek those out where it makes sense for you and your schedule. I'm also going to drop another quick link here in the chat. For those of you who are familiar with United Way's work, you know that every year we host events for the MLK Day of Service, which is coming up on Monday, January 17th. This will be the 27th annual holiday that was created to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King. And we're focusing our events this year on maternal health. So we have a supply drive that we're hosting on January 17th to support 3 organizations that United Way funds: Equity Before Birth, Diaper Bank of North Carolina, and Mame Inc. We're also going to host a couple of other events throughout the week. So you're invited to join us for our 5-day Maternal Health Awareness Challenge, which is a self-guided email challenge designed to empower you with new understandings of the connections between maternal health and poverty, and also educate you on how we can begin dismantling systemic barriers within healthcare systems. So that is a really cool way to expand your knowledge and your mindsets of the challenges in the triangle, and also a very easy way to do so. And then finally, on Friday, January 21st, we're going to host our next virtual conversation, which will be Maternal Health Unwrapped, featuring representatives from those same organizations. So that last link that I provided, you can sign up for everything. You can get more information, and we'll continue updating that as more events are scheduled. So definitely, we hope to see you out there. We thank you all for your support, and we wish everybody a happy holidays, a safe new year, and just thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining this ride.